So looking at question, and mine looks a little bit different because I don't have the little answer box, but I'll still do the, so there's a, oh, I'm sorry. I thought okay. So I'm going to recopy the first one so that it's down here. So 70 is greater than or equal to negative 10 times 5 times n. So if this were an equation, the first thing you would probably do is distribute, right? So that's the first thing I'm going to do as well. So the first thing you need to do is distribute. So you're going to do that negative 10 times 5, and that's going to give you a negative 50. And then negative 10 times n is negative 10n. And even though typically we don't bring down the equal sign in between each step when we do equations, for inequalities, that's probably the number one issue that people have, is keeping that inequality symbol lined up and facing the right direction. So even though I don't do it on equations, on inequalities, I bring this symbol down in between every single step because it kind of helps me to make sure I don't screw up the way I have it like lined up and pointing and all of that. So first step, distribute. We've been doing that for for months, honestly. So we should have that part down. So I'm going to get rid of that minus 50. And I'm going to do that by getting a plus 50. So that will leave me with 120. Once again, I'm going to keep bringing down that symbol in between my steps because it helps me to keep it nice and lined up. And then I'm going to bring down that negative 10. And because the 50 is canceled, how am I going to get rid of that negative 10 and please do that with me. Thank you. I'm going to do what? Divide it. I'm going to divide it. Thank you for not saying add. So divide both sides by negative 10. Oh, that's a little bit of a messy negative 10. So we've got negative 12 is greater than or equal to n. Oh, you read my mind. Because why did I write that in red? Because you have to flip your symbol when you multiply or divide by a negative number, which I did, right? So that actually needs to flip so that instead of facing in that direction, it's facing in that direction. Now, if you go to type it into the answer box, I know I wrote over where on your class kick it is, where it says inequality, type the variable first, okay? Technically, this is correct. There's nothing wrong with this. Mathematically, it is correct. However, the all white dudes who made those tests that you guys take that are more important than they really should be, like the ACT, the SAT, they typically put the variable first. So you should get in the habit of putting the variable first because that's typically how you're going to see it. Now, if you put it in like this, it's going to say that it's wrong. Because who's the alligator eating down here? The variable or the number? The alligator's eating the variable. So when you go to flip around that inequality, you need to make sure that you also make sure in your final answer that the variable is also being eaten in that final one right there. So that's the part that's going to be tricky for you guys today. You basically had to do like a double flip. You had to remember to flip it because you divided by a negative number. And then when you go to put the variable first, you've got to make sure that you've got the inequality facing the right direction. So since the variable was being eaten by the alligator here, when you type it into the answer box, you need to make sure the alligator is still eating the variable there. So when I go to graph it, I'm going to put a coordinate around negative 12. Am I going to fill it in or am I going to leave it open? Why am I going to fill it in? There's an equal sign there. And the alligator is eating the variable. That means the variable could be any number on the planet that's bigger than negative 12. Where are those numbers that are bigger than negative 12? To the right, exactly. So because this is a greater than, we're going to shade it to the right. So what elevates this to big kid math today is that you also have the interval notation that you have to do. This is where the real algebra 1 comes in. So the tough part today is going to be remembering when to flip your sign and keep it like lined up. That's going to be problem number 1. And then remembering how to do interval notation, which we did last week, right? So what's the smallest value graphed on my number line? What's the beginning of my interval? -12. Am I going to do my -12 with a parenthesis or a bracket? Why am I going to do it with a bracket? Because it's equal to. What else is going to be the right-hand side of my interval notation? Infinity. And what kind of bracket am I going to put around infinity? Parenthesis, because you never do a hard bracket around that infinity. It is not an exact value. Okay, so that kind of gives you all the pitfalls, all the problems that you might come up with, that you might run, or I should say obstacles. Problems makes it sound like math problems.
Do we take the arrow?
So, yes, you do need to just kind of take your pencil or whatever you're using and just darken it a little bit. And I'm going to have to come around and check your number lines by hand because obviously there's no like self-checking way to do that. But you guys can check your interval notation and your inequality, but please show all your work on the paper. But just use the class kick to verify that you're doing it correctly. While I've got you here real quick, I want to do number 4 and number 5 to make sure, because these were the two when we were just doing the equations. We still kind of had a little bit of a struggle with it. So I want to make sure that we don't mess up the solving part. So number 4, one thing I want to warn you about. If you decide to get rid of that 15 first, you can get rid of that 15 first. Are you adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing? What are you doing with that 15? What does that 15 like underneath the fraction bar mean? That means division. If you decide to cancel out that 15 first, make sure that you multiply everything by 15. If you decide to cancel out the 15 first, multiply all 3 terms by 15. Now, because people have a tendency to mess that up, that's why I don't ever start with the one that's right there underneath. I start by getting rid of that extra guy right there because I feel like you guys make fewer mistakes when you do it that way. So how do I get rid of a -6? Obviously with a +6 on either side. So that gives me 1. I'm going to bring down my symbol. Now I'm going to multiply both sides by 15. So we've got the solution of 15 is less than m. Do I need to flip it? Did I have to multiply or divide by any negatives? I didn't. So, but when I do type it in the answer box, because we want the variable first, pay attention to the fact that the variable was the alligator's eating the variable. So when you go to flip it around in the answer box, you got to make sure the variable is being eaten by the alligator still when you type it in for your answer when you go to flip it around. So why am I not going to fill in my circle for that 15? No equal to, exactly. And then is the alligator eating the variable or the number? It's eating the variable. That means the variable's bigger than 15. Where are the numbers bigger than 15? To the right. Personally, I think it's easier to do the number line and then use the number line to do your interval notation because I feel like it's pretty easy to see where the number line starts and where it goes when you're doing your interval. So what's the smallest value that is graphed on that number line now? What's that smallest value right there? It's a 15. That's the smallest number on there. Soft bracket because there's no equal to, comma, and infinity because it is going forever in the right direction, which is the positive infinity direction. All right. The last one I want to do, and then I'm going to leave you guys to do your practice, is number 5 because it's similar to number 4. Is there anybody not okay with me going to number 5 real quick? Okay. All right, so same idea. We've got division that we need to cancel out still, but this time we don't have a choice. we've got to cancel out that division first because the x minus 7 is like trapped up on top of that a. So, or 8, I'm sorry. So we've got to get rid of that 8, and we've got to get rid of that 8 by multiplying because that would be the inverse of dividing, right? What I do over here, I got to do over here. So that'll cancel. Got x minus 7 is greater than 8. Add 7 to both sides, so we've got x is greater than 15. And we don't need to flip it around this time because the variable is already on the left-hand side. So that makes that a little easier. My smallest value is 15. I'm going to leave an open circle because there is no equal to. And because the alligator is eating the variable, that means the variable is bigger than 15. So where are the big numbers? To the right. And up. They're up. You weren't wrong. They are up, but they're to the right in this case. So when I go to do my interval notation, the smallest value graphed on that number line is 15. And then it goes to the positive infinity. And again, just like last time, I didn't mean for all those to come out to be greater than equations. But in this case, they did. Remember, in case you get one, well, you will get one that's a less than equation. Remember that you'll have a negative infinity, and that negative infinity needs to go first. Because negative infinity is smaller than positive infinity. So I'm going to just shush and give y'all literally the rest of the time to work